Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Grant, and actually, Brad, I'm going to have you do something while I do this little introduction. You can see that Juanita Fisher is not able to hear us, and if you can type into the main room, if you're having technical difficulties, best to reboot your computer and come back and join us in a minute or two. If you can do that while I do this introduction, that would be terrific. Again, a belated and warm welcome to all of you. We have a good crowd here tonight for what is going to be a really fun webinar, and I say that quite sincerely. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Brad Daniel on a couple of occasions, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So I know that you're in for a real treat this evening. Just before I introduce Brad Daniel, I'll just give you a sense of where we're going to go over the next 60 minutes. Brad will start a presentation that will last about 30 minutes and includes a 14-minute video. And then we're going to turn it over to you to ask questions. And there'll be a special slide that comes up on the screen into which you can type questions, which I will retrieve and pass on to Brad one at a time. But you don't have to wait, and you don't have to wait to ask questions, because in this chat box that you can see that Brad Daniel has just typed in a message in the bottom right-hand corner, that's a place where you can type in, as a few people have already, that you can type in a question, as Juanita did a minute ago. You can say, hey, I can't hear anybody, what's the problem? And or in the middle of Brad's presentation, if you have a question or have a reference or want to make a comment on a point he's made, feel free to do that. And if you ask a question, it's quite likely that any one of the other 71 of us on the webinar this evening at this moment will try and answer your question in the chat box. So by all means, make good use of that. And at the end of the 60 minutes, and we may even go longer if we've got lots of questions, but what we'll do is take a break at 60 minutes at the very least, and I'll ask everyone to fill out an evaluation. It takes about 60 seconds. And those of you that do will get a chance to win one of two free subscriptions to Green Teacher magazine. And if you're not familiar with Green Teacher, I should just say a couple of words about it. It's a nonprofit magazine. If you could, we've been publishing for 20 years. It's a place where educators, mainly in North America, but increasingly beyond, have shared their best ideas for educating young people, whether in schools or out. And in the last 10 years, we've had the opportunity to publish 6 books, which you can see there on the screen. And more recently, as I say, I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with Dr. Brad Daniel. If you can advance the slide, Brad, that he's published 2 articles. The first one, Learn from My Mistakes, is really the focus of this webinar. That was 3 issues ago. And more recently, he co-authored with Clifford Knapp a wonderful piece on nighttime adventures and how to organize walks at night, which was also equally well received by Green Teacher readers. So now, without further ado, let me introduce Brad. Brad Daniel is the Professor of Outdoor Education and Environmental Studies at Montreat College in Montreat, North Carolina. He's the co-chair there of the Outdoor Education Department. And he has been a recipient of several awards for teaching excellence, and most recently honored as Professor of the Decade at Montreat College. In his free time, he enjoys hiking, backpacking, and photography. That's no surprise, given what he teaches. Brad, a warm welcome to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tim, and I would also like to add my voice in welcoming everyone on a rather cold night in North Carolina. I want to begin just by saying thanks for being here and giving you a brief overview of what we'll be looking at over the next few minutes. We're going to start with the purpose of the webinar, and after that we're going to see a video which will last about 11 minutes. After the video, we'll be identifying some of the major mistakes as well as some of the solutions to some of the problems that occur when we teach in the outdoors. I'll then offer a concluding thought and a story about one of my biggest mistakes that stands out in my memory for teaching in the outdoors. Then we'll open it up for questions. What we'd like to do tonight is to take a few minutes to illustrate and even caricature some of the more common problems that occur when we teach in the outdoors. These are some of the common mistakes that we make, and even though they apply primarily to teaching the outdoors in the skit that you will see, many of these mistakes can apply to classroom teachers as well. The video that you're about to see contains over 30 of these mistakes, and the students in the video have no idea what they're about to see. You'll see as you watch it that they will catch on after a few minutes through some giggles and some smiles. But the only student in the class that actually has an idea of what's going on is my faculty assistant, and her name is Sophie, and you'll see her repeatedly try to break in with questions from time to time. The lesson that I choose when I do this as a skit or as a training is usually inappropriate for either the setting or the season. In this case, we're going to be looking at the subject of leaves in winter. After I do this as a skit, what I'll normally do is a multi-stage sequential debrief. This is a technique where I ask each person to sit and to take about 3 or 4 minutes to list out the mistakes that they see me make, and also to come up with a solution to those mistakes. And then after a few minutes, I'll take the individuals and I'll pair them up and allow them to share their list with one another along with those solutions. After that, those pairs will fold into fours and the list will get gradually longer. The advantage of a multi-stage sequential debrief is that it allows the students to, number one, everybody has a chance to give voice to what they're thinking and what they saw. And this is a good way of drawing out some of the quieter members of the group. Later, when the group becomes larger in 8s or even 16s, they will be more likely to share if they've already had a chance to voice what they have seen. So it can be an effective way to debrief the skit. So as you watch the video, again, which is about 10 or 11 minutes long, what I would encourage you to do is, first of all, to just take note of the variety of mistakes that you see me make. Now, most of them will be pretty obvious. And in the words of the old doctor joke, some of them are as simple as, you say to the doctor, "Hey, doc, it hurts when I do this," and the doctor says, "Hey, don't do that," right? So in many cases, the solution to many of these would simply be to not do that. But how many of these do you see? And for fun, if you would like, feel free to type the number in the chat box of the mistakes that you see me make. More importantly, though, I would say make sure that you take note of anything that you might say, yeah, that's something I need to work on in my own teaching. That's something that really resonates with me. Take particular note of those things because one of our goals, of course, is to all become better educators. You should now see the Vimeo screen, and I will start the video so that you can actually watch the skit for the next few minutes.
Brad, I'm not seeing the screen yet.
Okay, I pressed the slide and the screen popped up as a pop-up box actually on mine. So you're not seeing it at all?
I'm not. Is anyone else seeing? It should be a clear access to a video. Oh, Deborah says she's got it, so that's good.
It looks like a lot of them are able to see it.
If Tim Grant's the only one who can't see it, that's okay. Let's proceed.
All right, we'll go ahead and start the video. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. It's always fun for me to actually see the faces of the students um, when I watch this, and it's fun to watch them catch on as it goes on. So hopefully you enjoyed that. It's always fun to caricature bad teaching instead of modeling it. Then we have a lengthy discussion about it afterwards. Because this is the first time we've done this in a webinar format, though, we're going to spend the next few minutes looking at some of the outdoor teaching mistakes that were made. Certainly we'll not be able to hit all of them, but we will be able to take a look at some of the major mistakes and some of the solutions to them. And for convenience, I've split them into three categories: professionalism, pace and group position, and then delivery. One of the most important things you can do when doing any lesson in the outdoors, of course, is to specify where exactly you want to meet your group. I did not do so in this skit, and I didn't provide an introduction to what we were going to be doing or why we were going to be in the outdoors at all. You'll notice, of course, that with respect to appearance, I wasn't really dressed professionally. I had my shirt halfway hanging out, baggy, ripped jeans I was wearing when I was teaching. I was late to class, something that doesn't come through very clearly in the video, but I was late to class and I was on the cell phone. One of the questions I'm asked most frequently about this skit is, was I actually on the phone with someone? No, I'm totally making it up as I go. I didn't really offer a topic apart from saying that the lesson was going to be about leaves. And it's important to let folks know from the beginning, what is your lesson going to be about? How are you going to approach it? And then how are you going to move through the lesson itself? None of that was done. There was no setup at all. A few other issues related to professionalism that it illustrates here. I did not check in with the group at all to see if they were prepared to go out in winter. This video was done in late winter, actually I should say in late November, so we're getting pretty chilly here, and students were dressed in a variety of ways. The lesson was clearly disorganized. I think that came through loud and clear. And I was not personally prepared for an outdoor lesson in the way I was dressed for the outdoors, nor did I check in with the group to see if they were as well. There were several times when I was actually condescending to the group. Most notably, went over to Sophie in response to her question that she asked. A few other professionalism mistakes that the video illustrates. It's important to check in with students to find out what their prior knowledge is on a particular topic. I did not do so. I absolutely showed no concern for their comfort or their safety. I never checked in with them to find out if they were understanding what I was presenting, and I didn't check in with them to see if they were comfortable. So here it's important to remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and when those basic needs aren't met, sometimes students really begin to check out in a hurry. You want to make sure that your group is comfortable in the outdoors, that they're dressed appropriately, and check in to find out if that's the case. I was not prepared, obviously, in terms of having a board or markers, but I was able to use a piece of cardboard, which I conveniently found on the bench right in front of me. As far as pace and group position mistakes, this is a category that contains some very common mistakes. If you could tell, the class was not really organized or positioned in any particular way, but they happened to be staring into the sun. It was at my back. They were staring into it right next to a lake, and this, of course, made it very difficult for them to see anything that I was doing. It's important to arrange a group such that they are not looking into the sun whenever you're doing an outdoor lesson. The group was not arranged in this case in any way. I simply walked up to a spot. They arranged themselves any way they wanted to. I had my back turned to them throughout the first hike and the last hike, and this, of course, is a bit of a no-no. You should always be able to talk to the group directly. I also stood above the group at certain times, and then I sat below the group at another time, sitting down while they were remaining standing. All of these, again, relate to pace and group. On the first hike, when we were going across the bridge, and then at the very end, when we were doing the rather short and horrible plant hike, I was hiking much faster than the group. This is something that takes place pretty frequently with outdoor programs. It's one of the most common mistakes that tends to be made. The group is not together at the stops along the trail. Maybe you have experienced that as a participant. If you have, then what you would have experienced is maybe you were the one at the end of the line who was really interested in the topic. You wanted to learn more about what was going on, but by the time you got up to where the instructor was standing, he or she had already moved on, and you had no idea really what they were looking at or talking about at that particular place. This is very similar to the old game of telephone, when people pass information through a line, and then what turns out at the end of the line is nothing like what was originally said. There's several ways that you can deal with this, because this is indeed, again, one of the more common mistakes made when teaching in the outdoors. One way is to use what I call rotation station. And in rotation station, if there's a group of, say, 15 in a line on a narrow trail, and there aren't a lot of places to group up and see things together, and hearing things is an issue, you can take the first couple of students who are in front with you, and when you come to something you want to show them, you can show them that and teach them a couple of key concepts about it, and then they remain in place, and they teach each of the subsequent small groups that come through. While they're doing that, you simply move up the trail to the next thing you would like to share. And when the second set of 2 or 3 students reach you, you stop and you show them, and they remain in place. Using this technique, you can, number one, ensure that everybody is able to see and hear all of the same information. The same information is passed from the front to the back of the group. This technique also reshuffles the group, because everyone is rotating to the back of the group after they've had a chance to present their topic multiple times. It also gives everybody a chance to teach this in the process as well. Final category are mistakes related to delivery. One of the common mistakes that's made in planning outdoor lessons is we don't plan in transition time. This can be anything from the time required to drive from point A to point B, or the time required to walk from point A to point B in the case of a short hike. That becomes important because if we don't plan transition time into the lessons, the actual lesson time gets squeezed, and sometimes reflection time and some of the key elements of really drawing meaning out of the experience are compromised. A few other delivery things that I'm sure you noted. I was boring and monotone at times. My hand was over my mouth at one point, and of course I didn't spell the terms so that they could actually read them. One point related to delivery that I really would like to emphasize is it's easy for us, if we're very excited, to try to allow the enthusiasm about the topic to dictate the pace of our lesson. And we really can fall prey to that very easily. So my encouragement would be not to allow the enthusiasm that we may have for a particular topic to actually dictate the pace at which we're delivering the lesson itself. Another key mistake, I did not have hand-lens for the entire group. I did not have field guides for the entire group, and I certainly did not have a proper field guide, which one of the students actually pointed out. I did go off on tangents at times, including the rather poor attempt to integrate Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. And clearly, there was much too much information for the amount of time allotted. At a certain point, I was moving very fast through the material, and that doesn't work well when you're dealing with terms and concepts like cyclic and non-cyclic photophosphorylation, concepts that need to be spelled, concepts that need to be unpacked a bit. Do not lend themselves to that pace. I did not allow questions at all, and of course questions are where students will often become engaged in the learning process. I cut questions off. I did not answer questions when they were asked, and the lesson really had no interaction at all. The handwriting was very poor. You may or may not have been able to read the word parenchyma in terms of what I'd read, but I've experienced that a lot of times where, as a student, someone would write something and I would try to decipher it on the board, and I had no idea what it actually said. I assumed prior knowledge to this particular group. I'd never asked them what their prior knowledge was, but I assumed prior knowledge to the group itself. I at no time really spelled or defined most of the major key terms, with the exception of that one word. I've already mentioned the field guide was inappropriate. I did show pictures from the guide, but I didn't pass it around, and the pictures were so small, there's no way in the world that you could actually see this. And so, again, having the appropriate materials for the group becomes very important. At one point, I simply read from the text, and the topic that I was reading from, of course, had very little to do with the purpose of the lesson itself. And I'm sure everyone recognized that I misidentified the tree, calling it a sugar maple, when in fact it was a tulip poplar or At one point, my faculty assistant, Sophie, asked me a question, and I responded by simply walking over to her and answering the question to her alone. Of course, one of the things we want to do here as a solution is to reflect any question that's asked from one part of the group to the entire group and make sure that they hear the question as well as the answer. This method that I was using is a version of what's called a sage on the stage. A sage on the stage is when you have an expert model of teaching. The expert is the one standing in front of the group giving out information, usually in lecture format with very little interaction or discussion. There's an outdoor version of the lecture format as well, and I call it the drag and brag. This is where you're sort of dragging people around, often very quickly, and you're lecturing them in the outdoors. There's very little interaction. There's very little inquiry-based or collaborative learning which takes place. If teachable moments had occurred in this lesson, they would not have been noticed or recognized, or time would not have been allotted for them. And that's one of the things we really want to cut on in outdoor lessons. The outdoors presents a wide variety of teachable moments that are magical, and we want to really take advantage of those when they come up. They may or may not fit in with the lesson, and I'll conclude with a story today to illustrate that point in just a couple of minutes. I never offered the students an opportunity to reflect on what they had learned, or even if they had learned anything. And of course, that's an important part of every lesson, to allow them to reflect on what they've learned, what they're pulling from it. There was no summary or wrap-up that was involved in the lesson at all. It's important to draw things down to a point. It's important in a lesson of any type, in classroom or out of classroom, to let them know where we're going, and then to go there, and then to tell them where we've been. And so to really have some type of a wrap-up becomes very important. And then finally, one aspect of this that the video did not capture, the lesson was cut off abruptly because I was not prepared. And my videographer was not able to capture this, but what I said at the end of the skit was, we're going to have to go back inside because I'm cold. So that's one piece that it didn't quite capture, but it was still a lot of fun. So why is this type of list helpful to those of us who like to teach and plan lessons in the outdoors? I have this list available, and every time I plan a lesson, I go back and I go down and I look at it, because the simple act of looking at this list of mistakes and solutions sort of brings it to the forefront of my mind. It makes me much more aware when I'm out there with a group not to position them facing into the sun, or not to hike too fast, such that the group is very far behind me. It really brings it into the forefront of my consciousness when I'm planning and teaching a lesson, and therefore can be a very valuable way of kind of reminding yourself of some of the keys. And because this webinar has primarily been about my mistakes, I'd like to conclude with the big one. This is one of the things I'm not very happy about when I look back at my own professional career. In the early 1990s, I was part of a Wilderness Education Association course that was in Anchorage, Alaska. And we were right next to the University of Anchorage in the parking lot. It was a Wilderness Education Association course where we were supposed to each teach a series of lessons. And one of the lessons I was teaching was on how to pack a backpack. And ladies and gentlemen, this was going to be the best lesson on how to pack a backpack that's ever been taught in the history of the world. And I was about 6 or 7 minutes into that lesson when all of a sudden a moose had the audacity to actually walk across the parking lot about 30 yards from us. Well, you can imagine the scene. All of a sudden, everyone's eyes were just fixed on the moose. Everyone was staring at the moose intently. And after 1, 2, 5, 10 minutes went by, I was getting a little antsy because, wow, the flow of my lesson had really been disrupted there. And so I said to the group, the moose is really cool, but, let's come back to finishing the lesson on packing a backpack. And as the words came out of my mouth, I knew that I had blown it, because the magic of the educational magic, pedagogic magic of what was happening in the moment had nothing to do with what was in the backpack. And it had nothing to do with that lesson. The magic was standing 30 yards away from us in the form of a moose that half the group had never seen before. We had about half the group that had never seen a moose. So that's one of the mistakes that I've learned from. It did make it made an impression on me, and I think about that a lot when I'm teaching in the outdoors. So we can learn from our mistakes, and my hope is that tonight, as part of this webinar, you have learned a lot from my mistakes related to some of the common things that we can improve on when we teach in the outdoors. I want to thank you for participating tonight, and now we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Brad. And we will indeed. If you could just move us to the next slide. And while you're doing that, I'm really tickled to see in the chat box, well, lots of you, of course, weighed in. We had technical difficulties at the beginning, and some of you may have seen my comment that if indeed you were unable to see any of the video or only part of it, we will, of course, send you, and you've already seen in the chat box, the URL for the video. You're welcome to have a look at it. I've looked at it about 3 or 4 times, and I still chuckle when I do. So it won't be lost to you. But I was also really pleased to see, Brad, you wouldn't have noticed it, but I think Jill Flaherty, you were the last to mention, I think you counted 47 mistakes. So some of you saw a lot into this, and that's exactly what I think Brad was trying to do with the video. Without further ado, please take advantage of this slide on the screen and type into the white box any question that you have. Press the button Submit. That will return you to a blank screen, and into which you can type another question. And for those of you who may have joined us late, this thing with in the bottom left-hand corner is our chat box. If you typed in a question, or if you don't have a question, please type in where you are from. Your state or provincial code, your name and your state and provincial code, and that'll give us a sense of who's who and where you're from. And we'll all take note of that as the questions are being typed into the back office. And I'm going to disappear on and off and grab some of those questions as they start arriving in the back office and relay them to Brad here.
Tim, I'd also mention while those questions are coming in,
Brad, I lost your audio there. While the questions are coming in, maybe you could continue from there. Sorry to interrupt again, Brad. I can't hear you. Can other people hear Brad at the moment? Brad, I can't hear you. Maybe you can try either lock talk again through options or pressing the talk button as I'm doing. Hi, sorry folks. Yeah, I think what Brad's doing is he's had to reboot his computer, I think, in order to get his audio. So hang in with us for a minute or two, and we'll take your questions. I see there's a bunch of questions here. I'm going to just start seeing if I can collect them here. Okay. Well, this is great. First, Ellen, we'll take your question. How do you handle a situation where you've got 30 fourth graders strung out on a line on a narrow trail? As soon as we've got Brad back, we will pose him that question, and away we'll go. It's also exciting to hear everyone see on the chat box where everyone's from. We've got a fairly good mix of Canadians and Americans from Nevada to Vermont, New Jersey, lots in Colorado and Georgia. I see lots of fellow Ontarians where I'm from here, the Yukon
Tim,
Territory.
can you hear me?
Brad, thankfully I can. So I'm going to.
Okay, I'm back.
Excellent. Welcome back. Let me pose the first question to you. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. Emma is asking, how would you handle a situation where you've got 30 fourth graders strung out on a line in a narrow trail?
With a great deal of patience and prayer. No, in all seriousness, I think that it would be great. Obviously, my hope would be that you would have a few other leaders available to help you out. If you do, then I would recommend breaking a group of 30 into two smaller groups and then working with those two smaller groups a little bit more efficiently. And with third graders, I've used that rotation station technique with third graders, but I usually have them in threes, and I usually am only 5 or 6 yards apart from each group as they teach each other. And what's fun is to watch the kids begin to really get involved in thinking about what they're learning as they begin to teach their classmates. Some of them really take pride in it, and it begins to show. So if you have opportunity, I would say, first of all, see if you can break it into smaller groups if you have some other leaders available, or some teaching assistants, or some parents that can volunteer in doing an outdoor lesson. One other point that I'd like to make in reference to that is that I think there's a fear on the part of a lot of in-classroom teachers that they can't really take students into the outdoors because they're not experts on the topic. This is something in working with teachers through the years I've heard pretty frequently. You don't have to be an expert in order to take groups into the outdoors. It is fine to go out and explore the outdoors together, to learn how to key out a particular plant together. And I think that we've got to get away from that idea sometimes that is prevalent of you have to be an expert in order to actually take people into the outdoors of any age. It's fun to go out and learn together, and the outdoors provides a wonderful classroom with a lot of stimulating topics to take a look at.
Great. I've got another question, Brad, is a couple of practical ones. How do you handle students that are not prepared for the winter?
Great question. That's where you always have a debrief and a front load of the experience before you ever actually go into the outdoors. If I were doing the positive version of that lesson, which I normally do when I'm doing some teacher training, what I would do is I would begin by talking about what they would need to have with them before the lesson even started. Before we ever even went outside, we would talk about what you would need to wear, what you would need to keep yourself comfortable, the amount of time that we would actually be out in the outdoors, all of before the lesson ever even got started, and it would occur inside the classroom before we even left. If it was going to be an extended time outdoors, I would actually send a list with them or send them an email with the list of what they would need for the lesson the next day. It's a great suggestion,
a related
Bill,
question.
about keeping a supply of warm clothes.
Yes, good idea. A similar question is also, do you have any quick tricks to help kids stay fit and stop talking with their friends during an outdoor lesson?
These are great questions and situations that we're all very familiar with, I'm sure. One of the things I like to do is to try to get them out of a sense of sight and into a sense of sound. And the way I will do that is if I have a couple or three students in the class that are just talking to each other, I'll try to draw their attention to something and see if we can listen to it. It might be the sound of an insect, like a field cricket, something like that. But try to get them to listen to something intently. And, of course, part of that is to get them to quit talking as well. But the goal there is to get them to stop talking, but also to listen to something that might actually form something that would be fascinating to learn about. What's out there? What's making that noise? Do you hear that? Can you hear that real clearly? those kinds of questions. Getting people to hear intently and to listen intently can be a way of also stopping dialogue from taking place.
Another question is, do you have any similar one here? Do you have any suggestions on how to handle or let one person dominate a field trip, such as a student or visitor who always wants your attention, does not allow others to ask questions?
Yeah, there's an old trick. If you envision a group in a circle, there's an old trick that's been around for a long time of, if you walk into that circle before you teach, the last place you want the person who's very domineering and taking over the conversation to be standing is directly across from you. There's about a 60-degree cone out from you across the circle that if a person who is more prone to speak is standing in, because you're tending to make more eye contact with them, they will be more likely to see that as a kind of a nonverbal cue to respond. So the old trick is to stand or sit, if you're sitting in a circle, next to the person who is most vocal. And by doing so, you're apt to make less eye contact with them, and in making less eye contact with them, less nonverbal cue, which they would then have a tendency to respond to. The other way that I like to set that up in a discussion is to say, I want to make sure that all voices have an opportunity to be heard in this discussion that we're about to have. So I want you to self-police and make sure that everybody has a chance to voice what they're thinking, and that everyone has a chance to hear the voices of your classmates.
Boy, we've got a lot of great questions here, Brad. I'll try and I appreciate your being nice, succinct answers, so we're going to get a chance to get to lots of them. Do you recommend including unstructured exploration time within the lesson?
Personally, I do. I think the unstructured time can be as valuable as the structured time, because that's where some of the initiative is taking place. I think part of what we're trying to do is inspire fascination within our students of any age, frankly. And that goes beyond simply taking them out and leading them through a lesson where there are some goals related to what we want them to learn. We want them to become fascinated with the outdoors, interested in the outdoors, such that they will go out and they will go through a process of exploring the outdoors or exploring things they find and wanting to learn more about it. So part of what we're trying to do is to create appetite for learning in the outdoors about those things, and unstructured time is a wonderful way to inspire that.
Shifting a bit, Pat Curley is asking, what cultural considerations do you make when working with certain populations of kids? And it's a question for me. I'm here in Toronto, Brad, which is considered by many as one of the most multicultural cities in the world. So we're often dealing with kids from very distinct cultural backgrounds. Do you make how would you take those kinds of considerations into an outdoor lesson?
Just as within class lessons, I think it would be important to get as much information about the group before you actually work with the group as you possibly can. There might be fears, concerns, a lot of different things can come into play. For example, I used to work at Taft campus in Illinois at their outdoor education facility. And while we were there, we would receive kids from inner city Chicago, kids from the rural areas out in the farm country around Oregon, Illinois, which is where Taft is located. Very different experiences that those kids would have. A lot of our rural farm kids had spent a lot of their childhood playing in the outdoors and were very comfortable in it. But when some of the kids from inner city Chicago would come out, and they, by the way, I would say were some of my absolute favorite groups that I had the whole time I was at Taft. The idea of going out and doing an organized night hike for 30 minutes was terrifying. It was a totally new experience. And so I had to modify the structure of the hike. It was much shorter. It was in different conditions. And we had a safety line that we were using for that. And we talked a lot before that hike ever even took place. We sort of sequenced toward the hike. And the point here is that you need to know the background of your group, the makeup of your group to the extent that you can beforehand, so that you can try to, as best as you can, anticipate some of the things that might come up along the way. And then The other thing that's important to do is simply to check in with the group as often as possible. I think a lot of times our groups will tell us what they're thinking, how they're doing, are they comfortable, are they not, if we're able to actually ask them those questions.
Brad, one person is saying that she feels that she's guilty of providing too much information on an outdoor hike. Do you have any tips of how to increase a sense of wonder?
Yes, indeed. First of all, great insight that you shared. That's one of the things I try to work on as well. I think it's important to do two things. First, don't allow, again, your enthusiasm for a topic to dictate the pace. And it's not just a matter of dictating the pace of the lesson, but it also sometimes dictates how much we try to cram into the lesson, how much information we try to include in that process. We want our students to come out of that experience excited, engaged, and inspired so that they're able to go back into another outdoor experience and learn more. Too much information can almost be like putting on too much large wood when you're trying to get a fire started. When the thing to do is to start small, smaller pieces of wood, right, and allow it to catch and begin to build instead of putting it out by covering too much. And so after a while, and usually we can read that because when you're looking at the eyes of the people in your group, when they begin to glaze over, right, we might have reached information saturation at that point. So it's good to leave them wanting more instead of leave them feeling like they're saturated with information.
Sorry, back to the subject of discipline. How do you handle kids who are repeatedly disruptive of a lesson?
Well, if it's a group that I have for several days, as opposed to a group that I have just one day, one experience, one shot, what I would do is, make the participation in the next activity contingent upon what's happening within that current activity, and I would speak with the person individually about that beforehand. If it really became a problem. The other thing that I've tried at times is to enlist their help in something, make them a helper towards some aspect of the lesson that I'm getting across. And sometimes that actually changes behavior as well.
And another question, what suggestions do you have for students that encourages them to reflect on what they've learned and how to sum up the lesson?
Of course, it would depend upon the age of the group, the age of your participants. But one of the things that I'm involved in right now is a study of North Carolina Outward Bound participants. And these are mostly 13 to 18-year-olds. And in the last study that we published, one of the things that we found was that kids 13 to 18 years old, they craved unstructured free time in the outdoors. They absolutely loved that. The other surprising finding that we found was that many of them expressed a resistancy towards the idea of journaling going into their solo experience, which was the primary experience we were looking at. And yet afterwards, many of them said that they enjoyed the journaling more than anything else that they did on the entire trip. Journaling, I think, is one of those things that people may not have done a lot of, but if they have opportunity to do some journaling, and that can include anything from words, poetry, writing songs, drawing, anything like that, something that captures that moment and that memory for them. Sometimes journaling can be a wonderful way to encourage reflection. I also think that one of the sad things about the way society often plays out today is it's such a fast pace, and all of our time is scheduled and it's packed in with stuff. There's a lot of static background noise all the time. So I think that it's wonderful to take some time to value solitude and silence as a means of facilitating reflection and to actually build that time into the lesson itself. In our teaching methods class, one of the questions I often ask the students is, I will say, I would love for you to begin, just reflect for a minute on the thing that's most often lacking from outdoor education activities today. And of course, the gag is that the thing that's most often left out is actual reflection time. Sometimes outdoor activities can become a series or string of activities with no time in between those activities to think about the experience, to reflect on the meaning of the experience, and to draw meaning from that. And I think we rob the experiences of their value to some extent when we don't provide that reflection time. So journaling would be a good way to do that. I see some of the suggestions that you're writing about are wonderful. Jack was talking about photography. A couple of others had mentioned that as well. Again, wonderful ways to reflect. But the key is to make sure there is some means of reflection that is a part of the lesson itself. Otherwise, again, I think we rob it of some of the value.
Brad, we have someone who mentions that she works at an outdoor education center where they bring in a lot of chaperones, usually 2 or 3 per group of 10 middle school students. And I'm sure this is also true of teachers who take students out, that they have parents join them on field trips. Do you have any troubleshooting tips for how to get students involved, either in the learning without speaking over the kids, or helping you as the teacher organize and teach?
Yes, we did the same type of structure at Taft campus that I mentioned a few. Would have a pre-experience meeting. There, I should mention, the students would come for 2.5 days, and then they would trade out midweek. So we would have all the students for 2.5 days, along with their teachers or chaperones that would come with them. And once the students arrived and were getting settled into the facilities, one of the things that we did was we had a pre-experience meeting. And in that pre-experience meeting, I was really trying to build allies among the chaperones and the teachers and give them an idea of sort of not just the topics we would be talking about, but the way we would be going about exploring the outdoors. So it wouldn't be, lecturing in the outdoors, anything like that, but it would be taking the time to explore this old log and to look at this log and see if there's anything growing on it. What are those gray-green crusty patches? So it was about the methodology that we would be using, and I would talk with the group in such fashion as to try to say, this is what we want to try to use as a guiding philosophy as we work with them over the next couple of days. So enlisting them, getting them involved in the process, not just in terms of the topics, but also in the way that the methodology would play out in the next couple of days, I think can be a valuable way of getting people on board.
Brad, a couple of people have asked, have asked an age-old question. How do you, if you're a teacher in a school, how do you get other teachers more enthused about taking their kids outside so that there's greater outdoor learning taking place?
I think that is a wonderful, wonderful question. I think the first thing to do is to try to understand the barriers or fears that might actually be coming into play. Well, I just received a message that I've been promoted to presenter status, so I'm very excited about that, and I want to thank everyone that's made that possible. But to answer the question, the thing that I think is important is to try to understand any barriers or fears that might actually be preventing teachers from taking their kids outside. And one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation that I've heard a lot through the years is when you really get down to it, some teachers are simply afraid to take their students in the outdoors because, one, they may not feel prepared to do so or feel like they have a lot to offer. They may feel like they may feel like they don't know a lot about the outdoors, and therefore, how would I have anything to teach my students in the outdoors? That's where the idea of collaborative learning and inquiry-based learning can really come into play. Two, they may have never had an outdoor lesson modeled for them, where the idea of taking a group outside may be a totally new idea. And then, so I think it's important to understand any barriers that come into play, and then to look at the outdoors not just as a place to learn about certain things, but to look at the outdoors as a place that truly inspires a sense of wonder, a sense of awe, a sense of what if.
Brad, thank you. That's great. Someone else asked, do you have any suggestions that are specific to early childhood educators?
Specific to early childhood education related to, I didn't quite get the end of the question.
Yeah, sorry. The idea that, do you have any suggestions for for early childhood educators who would want to take their much younger kids out on such hikes?
Yeah, I think one thing, and this is not my area of expertise, so I would be very upfront in saying that. But I think one thing that's important to note is that children can have just as powerful outdoor experiences in the playground as they can on a trail somewhere. And so the notion that we have to take them, on certain trails or certain areas in order for them to have a powerful experience in the outdoors, I guess there's a part of me that would challenge that and say, if they're in the outdoors, even in the playground, there's a lot to see. There's a lot to experience just in those areas, right around the school. So it's not something that you have to go far away in order to do. That would be one thing that I would suggest, that you could have an opportunity to actually see things right around the school itself.
Great. Well, Brad, let's take a break here for a moment. We do have a couple more questions, and if you're willing to stick around for a couple of minutes, I suspect many of our participants will too. But if you can, at the moment, advance the slide to the, or I think I have to do it just to bring out the evaluation. And folks, if you could take a moment to fill out this evaluation, it'll take but 60 seconds. And if you'd like to stick around a little longer and ask more questions, we'll have a chance to do that too.
And I would like to just say thank you to everyone who attended tonight. I've been reading the comments. They're wonderful comments. Thank you for your contributions to this. Our goal, after all, is to become better educators.
Thanks, Brad, and I think you've contributed immensely here. It's been a fabulous presentation. And folks, again, if you could take a moment, two of you who will fill this out tonight will be selected tomorrow or the next day, sometime before the end of the week, to receive a free subscription to Green Teacher. And if you're not a subscriber or you haven't, I'd gently encourage you to take out a subscription or buy one of our books. Help us help Green Teacher continue to offer these webinars for free. So scroll down and fill out each of those questions, and then hit submit. And in just a moment, we'll return to your questions that you were filling out a few minutes ago, and I'll happily start relaying them to Brad once again. So Brad, if we got maybe another 15 seconds, and then let's go. I'm going to see how we can do this to go back to the question slide that we had a moment ago. And okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll go back and change back to the earlier question slide, and hope we can pick up the questions that were left there, and if not, the ones that are in the chat box that have also been typed in there too. So one way or the other, we'll get your questions over to Brad. Brad, I'm going to have to. I've got the question back up there on the screen, but so any of you can type in any more. I'm going to need to get these from the back office. It's not. It's erased the ones that I was looking at on a preview. Although you may be able to see them yourself. Maybe not.
Tim,
and by the way,
seeing
folks,
some folks are writing that they did not have enough time to submit an evaluation.
Okay, you know what we're going to do? I'll put that back up, and because now that I realize I have to go separately to the earlier questions, I will return that evaluation slide for people to fill in. And I do apologize, folks, for taking that away from you when you were in midstream. hopefully it will be. Don't worry about hopefully it'll be easy to repeat what you've typed into in questions number 2 and 4. But I really appreciated your indulgence. We've always had technical difficulties of one sort or another in each of the 15 webinars we've done. Tonight has been blissfully absent except for things like this, so I'm glad that it's worked out. We were quite nervous, as you might appreciate, about whether or not all of you are going to be able to see the video, and we scrambled, Brad and I did today, to make it work, and I'm glad that most of you seem to have been able to see it, and rest assured we'll be sending out the link so that all of you can view it again, but also share it with your friends. I think it's a really rich resource that you've developed here, Brad, that's, I think, going to be widely circulated after this webinar.
That would be great. My hope is that if it's useful, that it will be used for any purpose that anyone would have for it, and you're welcome to use it.
A couple of people have asked the question about buses. The big challenge, you were obviously able at Montreat College to walk out the door of a particular building and do a nature walk, right on the campus. And for many people, that's more difficult. And really, the only way to get into a natural area is to take a bus. And as a couple of people have commented, it's very expensive and difficult. Some schools, one person mentioned, are limited to one field trip a year. This is kind of departing from the topic a little bit, but since you are our outdoor education expert, if you have any suggestions that people can use to increase the number of fields we can do and deal with the bus costs, we'd certainly welcome those too.
Well, first of all, I would say you're in great company, those of you that are wrestling with this, because it is a real issue. One of the things that we are struggling with at the college is the whole idea of 14-passenger vans. Insurance companies have changed their view of that, and so as a result, it's caused a lot of schools to rethink whether to use 14-passenger vans, and of course, that also comes up with buses as well. There's safety issues that sometimes are brought up. There's monetary issues, costs, things like that. If it's possible for some of your administrators and key teachers to visit an environmental education residential facility, if they haven't had the opportunity to do so, the first thing I would say is if you're limited to like a trip per year or something like that, if the school is open and able to take certain age groups to these environmental residential facilities for usually 2.5 days up to 5 days, that at least enables transportation to the place and back in a whole variety of lessons that can be done while they're there. If that's not the case, then looking at options related to volunteers coming in and being able to help out in the field right around the school, it's a real problem. Transportation at the college level all the way down to really K through 12, I mean, it's an issue that we're all struggling with right now, and part of it is being driven by insurance and what to do.
Great. Well, again, Brad, I want to thank you very, very much. I think we've you've answered almost all the questions, and I don't think we've had a webinar in which more questions have been answered. And indeed, this has been one of our more popular webinars that we've had. We had, I think, 89 people involved at the high point, and I can't thank you enough for all the work that you've done. You're really providing enormous leadership in the field in this way, and it was no surprise to me, but a delight nonetheless to hear how capably you answered the rapid fire questions put to you. And I think I certainly know I learned a lot, and by the comments in the chat room, it's clear that others did as well. So a big round of applause and hearty thanks to you, Brad.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. It's been my pleasure to be here with you, and Just from reading the comments, I can tell I'm in the room with a group of people who are inspired to teach and to learn in the outdoors, and that's always inspiring for me as well. So I thank you for that.
And ditto, Brad. The conversation in the chat box, the suggestions from one to the next was really rich, and hopefully you'll have a chance to scroll back through some of them before signing off tonight to have a look, because it as is always the case, and I recognize the names of a good dozen of the 89 people on the webinar tonight. There were really skilled outdoor educators, outdoor teachers here, still looking for more ideas and how to do a better job of being outdoor teachers. And I'm confident that even they came away with some good ones. But they also contributed greatly to the conversation by their suggestions and responses in the chat box. So. Thank you very much. There was, as a couple people pointed out, somehow your audio was kind of disappearing a few times, but it was never more than a sentence, and thankfully we were able to kind of, that wasn't any worse, and again, that's pretty minor in comparison to some of the technical challenges we've had in times past. So I think we're good to go, and later tonight, I'll have a chance to compile all of the evaluative comments. I'll strip the names away and send that to you. And as you can see, someone's asking if it's snowing in Montreat tonight. And Angela, yes, if you go to greenteacher.com, you can learn more about our books, our magazine, and you can take a subscription, but you can also sign up for more of our webinars. We're going to have another dozen in January, February, and March. And you can also return, as of by noon tomorrow, we'll have the archive open for you and your friends to play this, to listen to this webinar again and pick up anything that you might have, any points that Brad mentioned that you may have missed the first time around. So please take good advantage of that as well.
Great. And Tim, I would just say that it is indeed snowing a little bit here right now. And so everybody stay safe, stay warm, and enjoy the outdoors.
Brad, I am so jealous. That's terrible. We have had a few snowflakes in Toronto that have not even dusted or covered a leaf. There's not a leaf been covered in Toronto, almost 1,500 miles to the north. So I'm pretty jealous. I know some of the folks on this call there was someone from the Yukon Territory, there was people from New Brunswick, rural Ontario. They've all seen snow, and as Rink is adding, 2 inches in southern New Mexico. So yes, the weather is upside down. That's for sure. Anyways, once again, thanks everybody. I guess it's time for us all to say goodbye, but please come back and join us in for another webinar, and I'm sure I'm going to be twisting Brad Daniels' arm to do yet another one for us at some point. Take good care. All the best. And Brad, if you can turn off the archive, I guess that's our last official function, and then we can sign off for the night.